Like many of you, we've watched the recent flooding across the country with heavy hearts. Here in Austin, we've faced our own challenges with flooding. That's why planning for the future together matters so much. The City of Austin's Watershed Protection Department is updating their 10-year strategic plan, Rain to River, and they want to hear from you. Your input will help guide investments that protect Austin's waterways and communities. The survey is available now through September 15th at raintoriveratx.com. Again, that's raintoriveratx.com. Hey y'all, it's Nikki. It is summer, and for a lot of us, that means travel. Now, I don't know about you, but I still love a physical boarding pass. It's nostalgic. And even after the trip is done, I just can't seem to throw them away. Enter FrameBridge. They make it easy and affordable to custom frame just about anything. And yes, that includes my little paper boarding passes. So hold on to your personal piece of nostalgia with a FrameBridge frame. Visit framebridge.com or visit your local FrameBridge store in South Austin on South Lamar and in Central Austin on West 38th Street to start framing. Y'all, I watched PBS so much as a kid that my warm-up song is the Reading Rainbow theme. So if you're like me, these recent cuts to public broadcasting are infuriating. NPR and PBS just lost millions of federal funding, which means Austin's KUT is in trouble. Today on CityCast Austin, we talk about what's at stake and how we can save it. It's Thursday, July 24th. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here with Debbie Hyatt, General Manager of KUT. Hi, Debbie.
Hey, Nikki, how are you?
I'm great. So Congress just cut like $1.1 billion in funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which supports NPR and PBS. Our local impact of that is about $1.2 million, or roughly 6% of KUTX's budget.
That's right.
And NPR has now cut $8 million from its budget to try to help. So I want to know, how will listeners see the impact of these cuts?
Yeah, so, the $8 million for NPR, it's hard to know how they will absorb that. Right now, all we know is that they're doing some relief money for some of the stations that are hardest hit, some of the smaller stations, the rural stations and tribal stations. For KUT and KUTX, if we're not able to fill that gap, that $1.2 million gap, what you might see is, you might see some reporting positions that don't get filled. We've got some vacancies right now, and over the last several years, we've added like 10 positions to the newsroom since 2019. But with some open positions, we may not be able to fill those anymore. We may also kind of take a look at the hours that we're on air. Unlike a lot of commercial radio stations, we have hosted on-air time, all day long and into the evening and all weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, we would hate to do that, but, that might be one thing we would look at is, do we reduce the number of hours that we have a host there? We still have the programming content, but not the host.
Yeah.
And what those hosts bring to the breaks is really that sense of Austin and, public service announcements about what's going on here and the weather and things like that are important. Another thing that we are looking at, if we don't fill that gap, is what do we do about, all of the national programming that we pay for and some of the local programming that we do. We would kind of take a look at what everything is costing us and whether we need to make some cuts in those areas too.
Wow. Okay. So kind of like a comprehensive, overarching look at everything is kind of what sounds like you got to do. Just like,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a very selfish question. Is there any Is there any part of the programming that KUT is just like, we will not lose this show or this type of program? We can lose everything else, but we have to keep this thing. Because I know that there are probably people like me that are like, well, I don't want this to go away.
We're committed to continuing with local news. That is Texas Standard. That is the local news pieces that run in Morning Edition and All Things Considered. We're also committed to running a music station that really highlights Austin music, which is not always going to be the highest rated music.
Yeah.
Because we're taking a lot of folks that are relatively unknown and trying to expose them to a larger audience. And the top rated music station in Austin is one that typically is playing songs that you've been hearing for about 40 years now.
Yeah.
We're committed to that local piece. And for us, that includes Texas Standard as well. Our daily statewide show. Statewide is local when you come to Austin because
it is.
The capital's right here. And then we're also committed to, continuing to try to tell the stories that other people aren't telling. And that's where you end up with podcasts and shows like, Black Austin Matters and Pause Play, In Black America. Those are stories that are not being told by anyone else. And we want to keep doing that.
So, okay, how does Austin's NPR station compare to the others in the country?
Well, we have a larger newsroom than most of them do. And we're one of the few stations that is typically number one in our market in the radio market for Nielsen ratings.
Ooh.
And I think, we've sort of benefited from the generosity of this community. This community loves NPR and they love what KUT and KUTX do. So, yeah.
I mean, we really do, honestly. So what I'm hearing you say is that we're the best and the weirdest and the most awesome. I'm going to take what you said and just make my own narrative.
I'm fine with that.
And I agree. Austin does seem very, very into KUT. Maybe I'm an optimist, but I feel confident in feeling like we are going to help with that 1.2 million. But I'm thinking about maybe other Texas cities that are smaller or don't have the kind of support maybe that Austin provides. Are there other stations in Texas that are more at stake?
Yeah, I'm worried about Marfa Public Radio, which is a great little station in West Texas that, they have a reporting staff that does a lot of work that you've heard on Texas Standard before, but they also receive like 30% of their funding from the federal government.
Oof, yeah.
So they're in a tough situation. The station up in Lubbock that is run out of Texas Tech, that's another really good station that has a higher percentage of funding coming from the feds. And then Abilene is another one, where they do a lot of work with students there at the Abilene Christian University. They're going to be in a tough situation, too, because they get a lot more federal funding.
Yeah. Man. I think public broadcasting has been such a big part of our lives for so long that I think I almost took it for granted. It's just scary to think that people won't have it.
It is something we take for granted. And even at KUT, which has a really strong membership, a little less than 1 in 10 out of every listener is actually a financial supporter.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's good compared to a lot of stations.
Yeah.
And so, we do have a lot of folks that are taking it for granted. And I think part of that is because they think that, the federal money is there and that helps make it available for everyone. But I will tell you that, since our funding was cut, a lot of people are stepping up too. Like we've had, almost 700 new members already since that funding was cut.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Austin is evolving. Our identity is changing and evolving, but it sounds like Austinites still care. It feels like the people that are coming and staying are still just like people that find value in this resource, which is I don't know, it makes me feel good.
Yeah, well, it's not unusual for somebody to move from, say, San Francisco, where they listen to KQED, to
Yeah.
come into town in Austin and go, okay, where's the local NPR station? And then they,
Yes.
move over to 90.5 on the dial, and they're listening to us, and then they become supporters pretty quickly. But, most people, and I'll be honest with you, I was like this too. Most people will listen to the station for many years before they become a donor. I worked over at the Austin American Statesman for a long time, and I always listened to KUT and was a big fan of the reporting that they did. I always thought, oh, wow, their newsroom does some really cool stuff. And I listened for years before I actually became a donor. And then at some point I was like, what am I doing? I'm listening every day and I'm not a supporter. And, then I jumped on the train. But it just takes people time to sort of recognize that.
Yeah.
And what I hope is that, we have the time for people to get there without having to make big changes.
Yeah, I am the exact same way. I listened to it for years, just assuming that it was completely federally funded, which is,
Hmm.
my own weird brain. But
But that's one of the cool things about it, is the people who can pay are paying, and the people who can't, it's still available. It's
right.
it's free, no paywalls, no nothing. Just you support it if you can, and when you do that, you know that you're supporting it for everyone else too.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So, okay. Folks have a lot of options, like for getting the news. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about what is unique about NPR and PBS's content that draws people to it, and not just like initially, but consistently over the course of their lives.
Yeah, so two different things there. With NPR, it really is like you get that range of everything from national down to regional, all the Texas news down to very local. And because it's really community focused, like we do a lot of reporting that's based on questions that people have sent in to us. We have something called AT Explained, where we ask people to put in their questions. It could be really weird questions. It could
Yeah, I
be
love it.
really fun questions, and we'll send a reporter out to find out the answer. And that's not something, that you get with typical news organizations, because those are focused on, what the agendas are showing, the city hall agenda is
Yeah.
showing, or something like that. We cover those things too, but what makes us unique, I think, is those, sort of audience focused stories. And then, another thing that is different is that you're not going to get a lot of advertising or anything while you're listening to
Mm.
an NPR station or while you're watching a PBS station. What you get is, underwriting sponsors, but those are very short little, brand name recognition things
Yeah.
that don't get into, a lot of, who has the cheapest cars and the best mattresses and things like that. That's a big difference too, and that's one of the reasons that we have what are called, non-commercial education licenses, because we are, not running all that advertising all the time.
Right.
If you put your kid in front of Austin PBS to watch something, they're not going to get, every break being some sugary cereal. And
Exactly. Yes. 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 Yes.
that's important for a lot of families, and that's part of that unique proposition. And that's why the federal funding was there, recognizing that because we can't sell advertising, traditional advertising, that there are other ways that, other resources that we might need.
If you're a City Cast Austin listener, you know I love Cabana Club. And in case you haven't been there yet, here's what you're missing. Cabana Club is a new establishment in East Austin. It's open 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to late each night. Y'all, this place has everything: coffee, cocktails, co-working, 2 bars, food trucks, tons of indoor and outdoor seating, public Wi-Fi, plenty of parking, an on-site speakeasy, and a swimming pool that is always 21 and up and open to the public. It makes sense as to why I'm there all the time. If you're looking for a fun space to host your next event at, the space is large enough to accommodate partial or full venue buyouts. Visit them online at cabanaclubaustin.com and follow them on Instagram at cabanaclubatx. Your East Austin oasis awaits.
This episode of CityCast is sponsored by Babbel. Learning a new language opens the door to new friends, new cultures, maybe even a whole new life. So why not start that journey today? You can start speaking a new language with confidence thanks to Babbel's conversation-based technique that quickly teaches you useful words and phrases about the things you actually talk about in the real world. I'm CityCast CEO David Plotz, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel, just one of the 12 languages you can learn with it, including Dutch, French, Italian, which is going to be next for me, Turkish, and Russian. I love the interactive dialogues that Babbel has, which allow me to practice what I've learned right away, and also the speech recognition function, which makes sure I'm getting the pronunciation just right, which honestly, usually I'm not. Also, I love that Babbel's lessons always cover actual things that I talk about in the real world, like food, talking to people I've just met, and also food. Staying motivated to learn a new language has never been easier thanks to real-time feedback, progress trackers, and handy visualizations in only 10 to 15 minutes a day on Babbel's mobile app or website. So get talking with Babbel. I want you to learn another language, so I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So Hearst is rapidly expanding its Texas footprint, adding the Statesman and Dallas Morning News to a portfolio that already included papers in like San Antonio, Houston, and more. And so, I'm always worried when I see these big kind of like media companies just coming in and swooping things up. What's at stake for local news if public radio begins to like fade and more of these media monopolies continue to grow?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, Hearst, I will say Hearst is a good owner for these newspapers, and so they're going to invest back in the community, which is nice to see.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. But what happens a lot of times when you have the big corporate ownership like that, and you saw it when the paper was owned by Gannett, is that they tend to look for ways to save money by doing generalized news stories for everyone.
Okay.
And what independent news sources typically can do is we focus only on local news because that's where our community is.
Right.
What happens if we start losing a lot of public radio stations? In some towns, that's the only source of independent news.
Exactly. Yes.
And in some towns, there aren't newspapers anymore. A lot of towns in Texas have lost their newspapers over the last 2 decades. And yet they still have a good local public radio station that they can listen to.
Oh.
There was a study done, it was out of Medill, that showed that, just the dramatic decrease in local news sources across the country. But another study that was done out of North Carolina was one that sort of looked at what's the impact of this loss of local news sources. And what it found was that towns that don't have a local news source typically had higher tax rates, less engagement in elections. And, all of that comes from having a less informed citizenry.
I mean, it's access. It's about access to information. Everybody deserves this access to information. What you do with that information is your business, but you at least deserve the access to the information.
That's right.
So you can be informed. It's kind of infuriating.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it does affect a lot more than just the news that we end up, reading or hearing at any moment. It affects the whole community's health.
Yeah.
Community health has been tied to a vibrant media. And we're really fortunate here in Austin because we do have a lot of good sources of news. But I don't think anyone here would say we have enough journalists out there doing the work, because Austin's been growing and the number of journalists has been shrinking, and
Yeah.
we need to protect that.
So many Republican lawmakers say that NPR leans too far left. President Trump even called it, quote, worse than CNN and MSNBC combined. What do you say to people who believe public radio is heavily biased and shouldn't receive support from the government? How do you respond to people that say things like that?
One thing is I do ask if they are actually really listening, because if you really listen on a regular basis, you find news about a very wide range of subjects. A lot of it comes from the heartland. You're finding out about what's happening to, farmers in one area. You're finding out about what's happening to coastal fisheries. There's a lot of criticism that it's all East Coast, West Coast, and it's not. And the other thing is that a lot of the issues that have been, called out as being left-leaning are issues like inequity. Those are things that used to be the things that all journalists were expected to do. You are supposed to go out and find where there's inequity and inequality in how government services are applied and who's being treated what way.
But yeah, like it's like you find the things and you report on them. That's it.
Yeah. It's fact-based.
Yeah.
The subjects that are being picked by NPR and public radio often are subjects that are related to people that are having a harder time in society. And that is because they're the folks that have been underserved by media a lot. And so if that is left-leaning, then, it's just the perception of what is left-leaning has become such a different thing now, and everything is becoming partisan, and that's real disappointing to me.
Yes.
Everything is either left or right, and it's like, well, a lot of people are just living their lives right here in the middle and just trying to get facts and information and not trying to get caught up in that.
And I think that, to your point, because we now have social media as a part of the media, it has really, really, really colored the way people intake their information, because you have this algorithm that will only send you things that it thinks that you're
right,
like you're interested in. It's like when you go to a news source that's just kind of impartial and like, here are the facts. This is what we know. It seems really different than what you're being fed every day. And so I think it's easy for people to chalk that up to right or left, because they either see all left stuff all day or they see all right stuff all day. And when something different comes along, it's like, well, what is this?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And what happens is you end up with, like, if you go to Reddit to the NPR threads, a lot of times you'll see a lot of people who are coming from the left saying, why has NPR become so conservative? And it's just like, maybe you just need to get out of your echo chamber.
Yeah.
NPR is, trying to be straight down the middle, and just give the facts.
It's all perception.
Yeah.
The thing that I find kind of funny about journalism in general, I think if journalism is done well, it is impartial. And I find myself being like, pick a side. Then somebody had to remind me that is not how journalism works.
That's right. We're not supposed to pick a side.
Exactly. And I definitely find myself listening to NPR and KUT sometimes. I'm like, okay, pick a side. And I have to remind myself, that's not the point. The point is to inform. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people miss that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, you also sit on NPR's board of directors. What concerns are you hearing most from other stations, maybe, and their ability to survive these cuts? Like, what do you see ahead for you as you help steer NPR through these times?
So I think one of the things we see is that a system which has been sort of a loose federation of, stations that kind of work together is going to have to work a lot more closely together. We're going to need to make sure that we're running as efficiently as possible, and that we're looking out for some of the smaller stations, and that we're sort of building a network that is much more closely, aware of this impact, because it's being felt different in different cities. And, some cities that have been doing emergency fundraising, they've already received what they need to cover their federal grant. Others are still struggling, and know that they've got a huge hill to climb. And so what we've got to do is figure out as a network how we try to preserve, as many of the public media stations as we possibly can through that. And make sure that as we're doing that, we're not doing it just to preserve a station, but that we're doing it to make sure that certain communities are served. Because, one of the great benefits of NPR right now is that it can be heard in about 99% of the country.
Wow. That's
And
incredible.
yeah, has a large reach. And we want to make sure that that's still the case, so that when there are floods in Texas, that people, all across the country can understand what the impact of that is and figure out how they can help.
Along the same lines, you think about the way to push forward and to keep this really important programming on. To me, in my memory, this feels like the worst attack on public radio. I'm just like, oh my God, everything is on fire. As you're moving through this, are you guys thinking about any kind of plans for future? If this happens again and they go even further next time, here's how we can prepare ourselves. Because I do feel like there is just uncertainty in the way the country is moving right now. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I would say that once the federal funding is gone, which the next 2 years is gone, I don't think we can really rely on it coming back. And,
oh, man.
Doesn't mean we wouldn't hope that it does, but it's a lot harder to put money back into, the expense column than it is to take it away. And so what we're looking at is, what is the new normal here? What does it look like? What is our community support going to be? How do we look at some new sources of revenue? We've been looking at events as a better source of revenue.
Hell yeah.
Things like that. So I'm sort of looking at this as 2 years of federal funding gone, but it's probably the new normal.
Oof, that's tough normal. So is there anything else that you want the listeners to know that I haven't asked you about yet?
I mean, I just kind of want to double down on my gratitude for Austin, because we're really fortunate. Talking to other station managers, I know that I'm really fortunate to be leading stations that are here in Austin, where people really do care a lot about the community and local news and local music and about NPR. And so, I have nothing but thanks and, big heartfelt gratitude for that.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome. Debbie, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for chatting with me. I'm so glad I finally got to talk to you.
It was great meeting you.
I don't know. I believe in Austin, so I feel like we're just going to kick some ass.
I think so too. And I think that part of the solution is, our different media organizations kind of working more together. And how do we make sure that we together preserve the local media ecosystem? So I appreciate what you guys are doing at CityCast too. A whole lot.
Thanks. That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find links to support KUT in our show notes. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and of course, subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. And don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Austin member at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.